This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. East Coast fever kills hundreds of thousands of cattle in eastern and central Africa every year. The animals become infected when they get bitten by ticks carrying the parasite that causes the disease. A parasite is an organism that feeds on other organisms. Donald Knowles directs the Animal Disease Research Unit in the Agricultural Research Service, part of the United States Department of Agriculture. The service is working with the International Livestock Research Institute in Kenya to find better ways to prevent parasitic diseases in cattle. Dr. Knowles is also a professor at Washington State University. He points out that East Coast fever is not a contagious disease, so animals cannot give it to each other. You need a tick to transmit from one infected cow to the other. They won't transmit just by standing next to each other. You need a tick to move it between them. Farmers in parts of Africa use a vaccination method against East Coast fever known as infect and treat. First, they infect animals with live parasites. Then, they treat them with drugs to help them recover. That way, explains Dr. Knowles, the animal becomes immunized or vaccinated against a full case of the deadly fever. But there are problems with this method of vaccination. Uninfected ticks that bite the vaccinated animal can still get infected and spread the parasite to other animals. Dr. Knowles says once a cow is infected with this parasite, all the data indicates that the cow stays infected for life. That means that cow, even a cow that has been vaccinated, now it's protected against the disease, but it can still transmit. See, it's infected for life. And so that animal is still a source of transmission. And there are other problems with this method of vaccination. One of the things in using live vaccines is that they usually require cold storage, and that adds to the cost of it, and also adds to the difficulty of using it in places like Africa. For more than 4 years, American and Kenyan scientists have studied diseases carried by ticks. The scientists in the United States centered their work on the parasite that causes Texas cattle fever. This fever is common to the Americas. This year, the scientists began a new study in Africa. The study is aimed at developing a new vaccine for the East Coast fever parasite. Dr. Knowles says their goal is a vaccine that does not require infecting and treating animals or the need for cold storage. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. New studies have found that a chemical commonly used to fight plant disease is harming honeybees. Experts say the chemical may be partly to blame for the widespread loss of honeybees in the United States. The insects are important to farmers. When a honeybee lands on a flowering plant, pollen sticks to its legs. When the bee lands on another flower, some of the pollen falls off and fertilizes the second plant. The act of pollination is important to the growth of many fruits, vegetables, nuts, and other crops. Yet, about 30% of honeybees in the United States and other areas have died in recent years. Dennis Van Engelsdorp is a researcher at the University of Maryland. He wants to learn why so many bees are dying. His research team examined pollen grains that honeybees carried to their hives. They found that the pollen contained high levels of 35 different pesticides, chemicals used to kill insects. They also found that bees that ate some fungicides became infected with a deadly microorganism called Nosema. Fungicides are used to protect against fungi and are widely used for agriculture purposes in the United States. Mike Leggett studies pesticides for the pest management industry group Crop Life America. He says many of the pesticides found in the pollen examined by Dennis Van Engelsdorp actually protect bees from Nosema. Honeybees are important to agriculture. This makes the search for an answer to their deaths especially urgent for Mr. Van Engelsdorp's team. As he notes, 1 in every 3 bites of food we eat is somehow pollinated by honeybees. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. The pressure to feed Asia's growing population has led to dangerous levels of overfishing near Pacific coastlines. An example can be found in Sindangan, a fishing town in the southern Philippines. Wild catches are falling while prices are rising. One fisherman says the area's once healthy fish stocks are in danger because of an increase in the number of fishing boats. Across the South China Sea, fish catches near shore have dropped since the 1980s. That drop has pushed fishermen farther offshore and into bigger boats. An official with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, says some fishing methods are destructive. Benjamin Francisco says the use of fine mesh nets or explosives catch young fish before they can ever reproduce. This hurts fish stocks. The fish warden in Sindangan says most of the local fishermen use fine mesh nets, but these nets have been banned for years because they catch very young fish. To deal with problems like this, the FAO has been supporting the idea of licensing systems. The aim is to limit the number of fishing boats on the water. Asia has the world's largest fishing fleets. They represent nearly 3 million of the world's 4 million fishing vessels, and most estimates say that the numbers are increasing. In Hong Kong, there are increased efforts to supervise fleets and to ban trawling for fish near shore. More than $200 million is being spent in an effort to increase catches by small fishing operations. But Hong Kong's measures are costly. FAO official Benjamin Francisco says a lot of governments in Asia do not have enough money or the ability to copy them. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Farming without big machines is hard work. Planting and fertilizing alone can take days in the hot sun. Researchers are working to develop simple machines to make life easier for farmers in the developing world. They would also like to help the farmers save money. Jelle van Loon is testing a model of a handheld planting tool designed for small-scale farmers. It is a long metal hoe with just 2 flat teeth. With each stroke, one tooth plants a seed, the other adds a little fertilizer. Jelle van Loon is not a farmer. He is an engineer at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center in Mexico. Mr. van Loon is working to develop low-cost tools for small-scale farmers around the world. He hopes the tools will save them work, time, and money. Usually, he starts with a piece of equipment built somewhere else. An example is a hand planter from Brazil. The long wooden V-shaped tool has a piece of metal on the bottom for breaking up the soil. Opening the arms of a part shaped like the letter V loads seed and fertilizer into the metal tip. This tool is faster and costs less than planting by hand. It uses less seed and fertilizer. It can also reduce by half the time required for planting and fertilizing a 2-hectare farm. The planter still costs about $200 to make. Jelle van Loon thinks the final product will cost less. However, he says more work is needed. His team is now testing their 4th version of the planter. Mr. van Loon says the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center will publish plans for the tool on the internet after the group has finished its work. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. One of the great American success stories after World War II was the rise of industrial farming. But now, small is big. People who say they worry about their food and their environment are looking for locally grown produce from small farms. Local meat producers want a piece of the action. But small farmers often have a difficult time getting their animals to market. Many cannot pay the cost of a large slaughterhouse. Also, the number of slaughterhouses in the United States has decreased sharply since the 1980s. Some small farmers have to travel long distances to have their animals killed and processed. But now, if a farmer cannot get to the slaughterhouse may come to the farmer. The United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, is helping farmers to pay for and operate mobile slaughter units. These are trucks and trailers equipped to do the job, including inspection. A federal inspector travels with the unit. Last September, the USDA announced a $65 million program called Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food. The aim is to support local farmers, rural communities, and healthy eating. As part of that effort, officials are trying to spread the word about mobile slaughter units. 10 years ago, in Washington state, 15 farmers raising sheep and other livestock formed a cooperative. Their group, the Island Grown Farmers Cooperative, wanted to build a traditional slaughterhouse, but neighbors objected. So, the farmers designed a slaughterhouse on wheels. The Department of Agriculture approved the first mobile slaughter unit in 2002. There are now 44 farmers in that cooperative. And mobile units are being used around the country, not just for sheep and cattle. A group in Alaska uses a mobile slaughterhouse for reindeer. And an organization in South Dakota has a mobile unit for buffalo. The United States has a limited number of federal meat inspectors. Some farm co-ops operate with state inspectors. But red meat and meat that will be sold in other states must have federal inspection. Right now, officials say 9 groups are operating federally approved mobile units. They say these slaughterhouses on wheels are not only a way to build local food systems, but also to help local economies. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. For more reports, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Farmers may not be able to prevent natural disasters, but they can at least try their best to reduce losses. For example, they can plant crops that are more likely to survive extreme weather. In north-central Vietnam, people with small farms do not plant rice between September and December. Seasonal rains might destroy the rice, so instead they plant lotus seeds on raised beds. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says the lotus seeds bring a good price in local markets. Farmers in the Philippines are showing new interest in crops like winged beans, string beans, arrowroot, and cassava. The Asian Disaster Preparedness Center says traditional crops like these can survive the fierce storms that often strike the islands. The United Nations says some African farmers grow Bambara groundnuts during long, dry periods. The seeds of this drought-resistant plant can be boiled for eating or for making flour. In some parts of the world, farmers grow vetiver grass. Researchers in Thailand wrote about vetiver in 2007 in the journal Science Asia. They noted that the grass can absorb and control the spread of harmful wastewaters, like those from pig farms. Agricultural expert William Rivera says vetiver resists difficult conditions. It reduces damage from heavy rains. And vetiver planted on earthen dams may strengthen them against breaks and flooding. William Rivera also speaks approvingly of alfalfa. Its deep roots can find and take up groundwater. Those roots also help hold the soil against winds. And alfalfa can be a valuable food source for animals. The deep and extensive roots of sunflowers make them another good candidate for resisting extreme conditions. The tall plants have brightly colored heads that provide seeds and oil. North Dakota grows more hectares of sunflowers than any other American state. But North Dakota is better known as a top wheat-producing state. Hans Kandel works at the North Dakota State University Extension Service in Fargo. He says farmers in some parts of North Dakota plant wheat that is ready to harvest in only about 100 days. That way, it can grow before the hot, dry months of July through September. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can find captioned videos of our reports along with transcripts and MP3s at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also post questions and comments.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Iron deficiency anemia is the most common nutritional disorder in the world. People with the condition do not have enough red blood cells. As the name suggests, iron deficiency anemia results from a lack of iron. The World Health Organization says half the pregnant women and about 40% of preschool children in developing countries are not getting enough iron. Anemic adults cannot work to their full ability, and pregnant women who are anemic have a greater risk of problems during childbirth. Michael Hambidge of the University of Colorado is an expert on child health issues. He says the effects of anemia on children can be permanent. In a new study, Dr. Hambidge and others suggest that new kinds of grain may help reduce iron deficiency. They tested flour made from a special kind of pearl millet. The researchers used traditional crop breeding methods to increase the amount of iron in the pearl millet. The process is called biofortification. Researchers in India prepared meals with flour made from the biofortified millet. They used the meals to feed 21 children who had low iron levels. Then they compared these children to 19 others who received similar meals without the biofortified flour. The researchers found that children who ate the high iron millet meals satisfied their daily requirements for the mineral. The other children did not. Experts say millet is a good crop to reach those in need of iron because it usually costs less to grow than other grains. It also requires little rainfall. The first high iron biofortified pearl millet is already on the market in India. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A discovery in a laboratory could help lead to a new generation of drought-resistant crops. Drought conditions cause plants to produce a stress hormone called abscisic acid. This chemical activates a set of protein molecules called receptors. These receptors then activate a series of changes to help the plant survive. The natural reaction of the receptors is to close so-called guard cells on and inside the leaves. That closure decreases water loss and stops the plant from growing to save water during a drought. Researchers say they have discovered a way to supercharge or increase this reaction. Sean Cutler at the University of California, Riverside led the team. The scientists engineered abscisic acid receptors that can be turned on at will and stay on. They tested hundreds of versions of engineered receptor genes until they found ones that worked right together. The team worked with Arabidopsis, a plant often used in experiments. The results recently appeared in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Professor Cutler says testing the new receptors in the field may take several years. He also points out that drought is not the only cause of plant stress. What would be stressful for a crop plant is not stressful for a cactus, for example, because the cactus has evolved to live in dry deserts. In another development, scientists have produced a new system for analyzing genetic markers in rice plants. A genetic marker is a DNA sequence with a known location. It can help scientists identify nearby genes linked to individual qualities or traits. Anna McClung and Georgia Eisinga are genetic scientists with the United States Department of Agriculture. Their new system will let researchers genetically fingerprint rice varieties and gain a better understanding of the markers. Until now, breeders have been limited to using perhaps 200 markers. But modern technology lets scientists identify differences throughout the plant's genome, its genetic map. Ms. McClung says that means the ability to identify new genes that control biological pathways. These pathways in the plant may control traits like yield, disease resistance, and nutritional quality. The finding could make it easier in the future for farmers to grow designer rice, rice bred to meet their specific needs. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Read, listen, and learn English and much more with our programs and activities at voaspecialenglish.com. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Straw bale gardening is a way to grow food above the ground. Straw is what remains of plant stems after grain is harvested. The long, dry tubes are gathered into bales. Bales are often about a meter long and half a meter high and wide. Straw is different from hay. Hay is made from whole plants and used to feed animals. Straw is used mostly for animal bedding. Joel Karsten wrote a book called Straw Bale Gardens. He says this ancient and increasingly popular idea is a form of container gardening. He says using containers makes gardening easier by reducing the need to pull weeds and deal with insect problems. Joel Karsten says straw bales can require less water and prevent plant diseases caused by too much water in the soil. He says it is not possible to overwater a bale of straw because all the extra water just runs out the bottom. In areas with polluted soil, growing food in straw bales is easier than building above-ground containers for soil. Oats and wheat are the most commonly baled grains in the United States. Rice straw is also good for baling and gardening. The straw bale becomes both the container and the growing material. Preparing the bale takes about 2 weeks. The first step is to add water and fertilizer to the center of the bale every day for 3 days. This begins the process of bacteria breaking down the straw into a growing medium. Once this happens, the bales are ready for seeds or young plants. Some experts say planting seedlings is better than growing from seeds. You can find plenty of information about straw bale gardening on the internet. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.